Search for Nancy Guthrie. We do know 3 people were detained. Police activity could be seen 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, and local police and several unmarked vehicles, including forensics and SWAT teams, could be seen gathering.
There are moments in a criminal investigation when the entire direction of a case pivots on a single discovery. Not always something loud. Not always something dramatic. Sometimes it is a detail so quiet, so understated, that most people would walk right past it. But federal agents are not most people. And what they found, or perhaps more accurately, what they realized was missing, inside Nancy Guthrie's home has reportedly sent shockwaves through the investigative team, forcing a re-examination of assumptions that had guided the case from its very first hours. Tonight, we are breaking down what we know, what investigators are refusing to say, and why the silence surrounding this case may be the most telling signal of all. Let's begin at the beginning, because the beginning is where everything about this case becomes deeply unsettling. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance did not begin with chaos. That is one of the first things that struck investigators when they initially reviewed the circumstances of her last known evening. By almost every visible account, the night unfolded the way thousands of ordinary nights do across America. Family gathered. A meal was shared. There was laughter, conversation, the comfortable rhythm of people who know each other well. Neighbors heard nothing alarming. No raised voices. No sounds of distress. No phone calls placed to emergency services. Nothing in the external environment gave any indication that by the following morning, Nancy Guthrie would be gone. She was reportedly driven home just before 10 o'clock that night. Law enforcement has confirmed that detail, though they have been notably guarded about identifying the individual who drove her. That level of caution around what might seem like an insignificant logistical fact tells experienced observers something important. In federal investigations, information is only withheld when sharing it would compromise something. When investigators decline to name a driver, it means the identity of that person remains relevant to lines of inquiry that are still open. Nancy arrived home. And somewhere between that arrival and the following morning, her life was interrupted in a way that no one has yet been able to fully explain to the public. What greeted investigators when they first entered that home is at the center of everything that followed. The first sweep of a residence after a person goes missing is one of the most critical procedures in any investigation. Trained agents are not walking through looking for obvious signs of violence, though they note those too. They are looking for disruption. They are measuring the home against itself, against what it should look like based on the person who lived there, based on the routines that left traces in every corner of every room. A coffee cup in an unusual location. A door left unlocked that was always kept locked. A light left on in a room rarely used. A phone not on its charger at a time when it always would have been. These are the details that whisper to investigators long before any major evidence starts to speak. In Nancy Guthrie's home, what reportedly unsettled investigators from the very beginning was not what they found. It was what they didn't find. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged door frames, no shattered windows, no overturned furniture, no blood, no visible indication that any kind of physical struggle had taken place inside those walls. And while the public often interprets that kind of absence as reassuring, experienced federal investigators interpret it as a warning. When a person is taken from their home against their will, there is almost always evidence of resistance. Humans resist. It is instinct. A knocked-over lamp, scratch marks on a surface, a displaced rug, a dropped item. The physical environment almost always records what the body tried to do. When it doesn't, one of two things is generally true. Either the person left that home without perceiving any immediate danger, which means something or someone convinced them to walk out voluntarily, or the scene was carefully managed afterward by someone who knew what investigators look for and worked methodically to erase it. Neither possibility is comforting. Both possibilities immediately elevated the urgency of the federal response. The FBI's involvement in this case was not slow or reluctant. It was fast, decisive, and notably early. That timing alone is significant. Federal agencies are not dispatched to disappearances automatically. They enter cases when specific indicators emerge, indicators that suggest the situation extends beyond the operational capacity of local law enforcement, or when the nature of what is unfolding touches on federal jurisdiction. In Nancy Guthrie's case, several of those indicators appeared within hours. The absence of a clear explanation for how she left her home, the tight and well-defined window during which the disappearance occurred, and then, critically, the emergence of alleged ransom communications directed at media outlets. That last development changed everything. When ransom demands are distributed through digital channels, when they involve encrypted payment methods or are transmitted across state lines, the FBI becomes not just a participant in the investigation but its primary authority. The agency has resources, technical capabilities, and legal tools that no local department can replicate. And when those capabilities are activated early, it means investigators believe they are dealing with someone who planned this, someone who anticipated the response and built their actions around it. Federal agents processed Nancy Guthrie's home. They documented. They photographed. They collected. They analyzed. And then, after the home was released, something happened that immediately caught the attention of anyone watching this case closely. They went back. In the world of federal investigations, a return visit to a process scene is not routine. Crime scenes are handled with a structured protocol designed precisely to ensure thoroughness the first time. When agents go back, it is not because they forgot something. It is because something changed. New data emerged. A timeline shifted. Information gathered elsewhere pointed back towards something inside that home that was initially considered insignificant or was overlooked in the context of what was known at the time. The return to Nancy Guthrie's home happened at night. Lights were visible inside. Personnel came and went. No official statement accompanied the activity. No press briefing. No clarification offered to the family's representatives or to reporters stationed outside. Just quiet, purposeful movement in and out of a residence that had already been processed once before. That silence is meaningful in ways that extend beyond simple discretion. When investigators make a return visit and decline to explain it, they are protecting something specific. They have identified a thread they do not want pulled publicly. They have found or confirmed something that changes the shape of the investigation in a way that, if disclosed, could alert someone who is monitoring news coverage or social media for indicators of how close authorities are getting. Sources familiar with the case have suggested that whatever prompted that return visit was not expected. That word, unexpected, carries significant weight in this context. Investigators in a case this serious do not use that word loosely. Something about what was found, or what was confirmed missing, during that second examination of the home fell outside the parameters of what the investigative team had anticipated finding. Meanwhile, a separate but equally notable development occurred at a family member's residence. Late at night, law enforcement was observed entering that location and remaining inside for an extended period. Camera flashes were visible from outside. Personnel moved in and out without public explanation. And the following morning, the tone of everything surrounding this case shifted noticeably. Family communications became more urgent. Official statements became more carefully worded. The kind of measured, steady flow of information that had characterized the early stages of the investigation essentially stopped. Now, it is important to say this clearly. The presence of law enforcement at a family member's home does not, by itself, indicate suspicion directed at that family. Investigators revisit locations connected to victims and their circles for dozens of reasons that have nothing to do with accusation. Clarifying a timeline. Documenting a layout. Confirming details given in earlier statements. Collecting items that have since become relevant based on new information gathered elsewhere. But the timing, combined with what happened at Nancy Guthrie's home, and combined with the abrupt change in how information was being communicated, suggests that something in this investigation reached a tipping point. Investigators moved from gathering information to refining a specific, focused theory. And when that shift happens, law enforcement becomes far less interested in speaking to the public and far more interested in protecting the accuracy of what they now believe they understand. Inside that home, beyond the physical evidence, investigators were reconstructing something else entirely: a digital portrait. Modern disappearances are investigated on two parallel tracks simultaneously. The physical scene tells one part of the story. The digital ecosystem tells another. And in many cases, the digital record is more precise, more honest, and more difficult to manipulate than anything left behind in a room. Investigators examining Nancy Guthrie's home would have collected every connected device available: phones, tablets, laptops, smart speakers, routers, thermostats, doorbell systems, any technology that records interaction, location, or behavior. Each of these devices carries data that is time-stamped with a precision that human memory can never replicate. When was the last time a phone screen was activated? Did the GPS on that device move during the window when Nancy was reported missing? Did the home's router log show a device disconnecting at an unusual time? Did a door sensor record movement at a moment inconsistent with the timeline being presented by witnesses? These are not hypothetical questions. They are the exact questions federal investigators would have been answering in the hours and days following the disappearance. And the answers to those questions, particularly any answers that contradicted what had been told to investigators in interviews, would explain both the return visit to the home and the sudden, notable increase in urgency from everyone involved. Digital evidence has a quality that physical evidence sometimes lacks. It either happened or it didn't. A location ping at 10:47 p.m. is not open to interpretation. A router log showing a device active at 2 a.m. in a home where everyone claims to have been asleep is not a matter of perspective. When digital data conflicts with a human narrative, the data wins. And when investigators find that kind of conflict, everything they thought they knew about the timeline has to be reassembled from scratch. There is also the question of the ransom communications themselves. In cases where ransom demands are made, investigators do not simply react to those demands. They study them. Every word is analyzed for vocabulary patterns that might identify education level, regional origin, or cultural background. The timing of when messages were sent is compared against known timelines. The method of delivery reveals something about technical sophistication. The demands themselves, what is asked for, how specific the instructions are, whether they include verifiable information about the victim, tell investigators whether they are dealing with someone experienced or someone improvising. Experienced actors in situations like this make demands that are structured and controlled. They anticipate investigative responses. They build in contingencies. They communicate in ways designed to maintain leverage without providing traceable information. Improvised actors make mistakes. They include details that reveal knowledge they shouldn't have. They make demands at times that conflict with stated timelines. They communicate through channels that can be traced with the right tools. The FBI's technical teams would have spent significant time examining every aspect of the ransom communications attributed to this case. And whatever they found in those communications, whether signs of sophistication or signs of errors, would have dramatically shaped the direction of the investigation in ways the public has not been told. The investigation has now entered what experienced observers describe as its most sensitive and critical phase. At this stage, federal investigators are no longer asking broad questions. They have narrowed their focus to specific individuals, specific timelines, specific pieces of evidence that either confirm or challenge the theory they are currently operating under. Every action taken from this point forward is deliberate. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is exploratory. Agents at this stage of an investigation are building a case, and building a case requires patience, precision, and a willingness to remain silent even when public pressure demands answers. That pressure has been considerable in this case. Media coverage has been intense. Online speculation has filled every gap left by official silence. Family representatives have made public pleas. And through all of it, federal investigators have offered almost nothing. That restraint is, in a strange way, encouraging. When investigators stop talking, it usually means they have something worth protecting. Silence is not the absence of progress. In most serious cases at this stage, silence is the loudest possible signal that progress is being made. The FBI does not go quiet because it is confused. It goes quiet because it has found something it needs to protect long enough to act on. Whatever was discovered inside Nancy Guthrie's home during that second, unannounced visit has clearly reshaped the internal direction of this case. The fact that no explanation was offered, that no briefing followed, that the family's messaging shifted in urgency immediately afterward, all of it suggests that the investigation crossed a threshold. Investigators moved from uncertainty into something closer to clarity. And clarity at this stage means preparation for action. The ransom deadline that has been referenced in coverage of this case introduces a different kind of pressure. Deadlines in cases like this are not simply clocks counting down to a single outcome. They are negotiating tools. They are tests of resolve. And for investigators, they are opportunities to observe behavior. How someone responds when a deadline passes reveals an enormous amount about their actual position. If communication continues after a deadline is missed, it tells investigators that the person on the other side of these demands is willing to negotiate, is not operating from a position of complete confidence, and may be susceptible to strategies designed to extend dialogue while building a case. If communication stops entirely after a deadline passes, investigators analyze that silence against every other data point in the case, looking for patterns that explain the change. What investigators are most careful to avoid is any action that could endanger Nancy Guthrie, assuming she is alive, or that could compromise the case being built against whoever is responsible for her disappearance. Every public statement is weighed against that risk. Every media briefing is evaluated for what it might accidentally reveal to someone paying close attention. And in a case this widely covered, the assumption must be that whoever is responsible is watching. That awareness governs everything. It explains why family members are sometimes shielded from certain information. Not because investigators distrust them, but because an emotional reaction from a family member, even an understandable one, can inadvertently signal to a suspect how much law enforcement actually knows. Controlling the flow of information is not cruelty. It is strategy. And in a situation like this, strategy is what protects lives. Let's return to the home one more time, because that is where this case truly lives. Every residence is, in a sense, a record. It holds the habits, the routines, the small daily choices of the person who inhabits it. Investigators understand that, and they use it. When they enter a home after a disappearance, they are not just looking at the space in front of them. They are comparing what they see against what that home should look like. They are measuring deviation against baseline. In Nancy Guthrie's home, that comparison produced something troubling. Not because the home was in disarray, but because in critical ways, it wasn't. The absence of disruption, the silence of the physical space, became itself a form of evidence. It told investigators that whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie either began somewhere other than inside those walls, or it was carried out by someone who understood how to leave nothing behind. Both of those possibilities point toward planning. And planning points toward a person who thought about this before it happened. Someone who considered the response. Someone who anticipated what investigators would look for. Someone who made decisions not in a moment of impulse, but over time, with deliberate intention. That realization, more than any physical item removed from the home, is what changed the tone of this investigation. The case stopped being about locating a missing person and became about dismantling a plan that someone else had already set in motion. It leaves us watching a case that has entered its most consequential phase. Federal investigators are operating with a level of focus and urgency that does not get applied to cases where the direction is unclear. The resources being devoted to this investigation, the interagency coordination, the technical analysis, the careful management of all public communications, all of it reflects an investigative posture that assumes an outcome is approaching. That outcome may not arrive publicly in a single dramatic moment. Federal cases rarely do. More often, conclusions surface through court filings, through charges announced with deliberate language, through confirmations that arrive days or weeks after the actual events they describe. The public learns what happened long after investigators already knew. But what we can say with confidence, based on everything observable about how this case has been handled, is this. The FBI does not process a home twice without reason. It does not fall silent at a case's most public moment without purpose. It does not coordinate late-night visits to multiple residences without having reached conclusions that require verification. And it does not manage a case with this level of precision unless the people running it believe they are close to something that matters. Whatever was found inside Nancy Guthrie's home, whether something that was there that shouldn't have been, or something that should have been there and wasn't, it set this investigation on a path that moves in one direction. Forward. Toward accountability. Toward answers. The clock that everyone is watching publicly is not the only clock running in this case. There is another one, the one inside the investigation itself, and it has been moving steadily, quietly, and with purpose from the very first moment federal agents walked through that door. When it stops, this case will be over. And whatever it reveals will speak not just to what happened to Nancy Guthrie, but to the patience and precision of the people who refused to stop looking until they found the truth. Stay with this story, because based on everything we are watching unfold, the next development may be closer than anyone outside that investigation currently knows.